My side. My name is Birgit Winn, and I'm with SHS Vivion and responsible for the compliance product group. I'm with SHS for a little bit more than a year now, and as a lawyer, I have a broad experience in legal, audit, and compliance. And yeah, I want to pass over to Felix.
Yeah, hello and good morning from my side. My name is Felix Safran and I'm here at DNB Senior Solution Sales Advisor in our line of business, finance and risk. And I'm with DNB now for 5.5 years. And yeah, then let's start with the webinar. So the first, let's take a look at the agenda. So we will give you some overviews today about business risks and supply chain disruptions. You will get more information about national and international guidelines. I will tell you a little bit more about what DNB with what data DNB can help you here. And then Birgit will give you some more information about implications of new regulations for companies. So first of all, I like to start with the top 10 risks that DNB sees in the current situation. So I think a lot of them are well known for you, but it's always a good idea to get a quick overview on that. So one of the very current situations is the global inflation. So this is a part of the economic concerns. Also the resurgent COVID-19 waves. This is also a thing that companies have to deal with. And everybody knows the China's economic slowdown and also new climate policies. So this there are a lot of things there at the moment very hard for companies. Another topic, more from a technological perspective, is cyber or vulnerabilities. And so then jump to the next point. We have also political risks at the moment. Everybody knows the Russia and Ukraine crisis. And also in remembering that there's competition between the US and China. I think this was a very big topic. If you think 3 years ago, it was the main topic in the world. And now there are a lot of other parts, but it's still there. There's also a lot of political polarization and in the EU and outside of the EU. So this is quite hard for companies to deal with. And all these challenges, putting the supply chains under pressure. And that is what I like to show you in the next parts. So from computer chips to building materials, the world is still struggling with supply chain shortages triggered or exacerbated by the pandemic. Even aid agencies who distribute food and clothing are struggling to find what they need. And so as you can see here, the Global Supply Chain Pressure Index is developed by the New York Federal Reserve and integrates a number of common measures like transportation costs, delivery times, backlogs, and purchased inventory with the aim of providing a more comprehensive overview on potential disruptions to global supply chains. And on the next slide, you will see that on the reaction of different markets to several events. So it's the laser pointer here. So, for example, the first lockdown, you see there's a high reaction in the different markets. Then, for example, the other things like the Suez Canal obstruction or such things. So there's a lot of things there make pressure on the supply chains. One event or one actual situation that I like to look a little bit further, deeper, is the Russia and Ukraine crisis. This is also something that has a high impact on companies. For the moment, the EU sanctions lead to an additional effort. So ownership structures and of customers and suppliers must be checked. And with regard to sanctions, companies and individuals, and then you have to do suitable actions to make this. For the moment, there are around about 1,100 individuals. They are sanctioned and 80 organizations. And this is a high impact. So a lot of companies are linked with Russian and Ukrainian companies. To make that a little bit clearer, I would like to give you some insights of the DNB data. So our data scientists did some analysis and showed that at least 374,000 companies worldwide rely on Russian suppliers. So over 90% of them are based in the US. And similarly, at least 241,000 companies worldwide rely on Ukrainian suppliers. So we have a very big effort on the global economies here. And now take a look on the numbers on the right side. This real data, so also an insight of our trade data that we have here at DNB. There are, for the moment, 14,700 tier 1 and 7.6 million tier 2 supplier relationships with Russians entity globally. As a result, we are seeing the ripple effects of US, UK, and EU sanctions on Russian companies. But take a look on the exponential growth and imagine. So this is just the exponential growth from tier 1 to tier 2, and now imagine the exponential effect for tier N relationships. So there will be much more. So if you take a look on the tier N supplier relationships, nearly every company will have a connection to Russian companies. And that's the actual political parts, but there's a lot of more effort by new challenging regulation. So, and I like to give you here also a quick overview. So in fact, a whole range of ESG related regulations have emerged over the last 10 years, as the importance of protecting natural resources, data security, and human rights has also increased. We have several regulations for green investments, like the EU taxonomy that's on the way. In Asia, stock exchanges requires disclosure of ESG metrics in order for companies to be listed on the stock markets. And the US has started to publish guidelines for future disclosure of climate-related data. And I will go further now in some of the actual regulations, but as you can see, there are a lot of new things, and especially in the last 10 years, there were more and more from that side. But it's not a really new theme, so a new topic. There are also some regulations from the 70s, but I think the most of them came up in the last 10 years. So I think the most of you know, in meantime, here the German Supply Chain Act, but let me give you a brief summary to that. Enacted in June 2021, and it will affect from January 2023. As you can see here, all big companies with a minimum of 3,000 employees in Germany. And from 2024 on, it's for all companies that have more than 10,000 employees here. Just to let you know, the HGB, so the starts big companies with 250 employees. That's what they say are big companies. But in that law, for the moment, we start with the very big companies. Yeah, the focus is here on human rights, prohibition of slavery, forced labor, prohibition of child labor, freedom of association, prohibition of discrimination. There are also environmental aspects, and yeah, the supply chain will also have some penalties. So one, I think, very hard penalty is the exclusion from public tenders. So for a lot of companies, they don't fulfill these requirements. They will be excluded from that if you don't have done your job here. And yeah, there will be also fines up to 800,000 euros or 2% of the average of the yearly turnover. And this is the globally turnover. So it could be very expensive on that. Yeah, the next thing I like to tell you about is a little bit more about the new EU draft. So there is also a EU directive in the pipeline, and it will, yeah, it goes further than the German law. So the items in gray are also part of the German regulation, and the black ones are additional regulations. They will come up here. So especially here, this is very interesting, because do you remember the effect from before, from tier 1 to tier 2 suppliers? The EU direction says, okay, you have to check not just the tier 1 suppliers, you have also to check the tier 2 and tier N suppliers. So there will be another big effort for all companies to check that their supply chain. Yeah, this is, I think it's very important. Also, they say in the EU, we start with companies that are more than 500 employees. And as said before, in Germany, there's from 1,000 upwards. And what is also very hard topic here is the liability for damage caused by failure. So there will be also some some penalties for that here. On the next slide, I would like to give you some information about the EU taxonomy. The EU taxonomy is designed to support business and investors in the transition to a sustainable economy. The performance thresholds will enable access to green financing and help to improve environmental performances. So also there is another point to change the economics, and also a big effort and more things to do for the businesses. Usually, as you can see, there are a lot of requirements from the politics, from the companies itself, from the global situation as well. So there are a lot of regulations that companies have to fulfill, and this is a lot of work to do. And now I'd like to show you a little bit more how DNB supports or can support you with relevant information. So first of all, I like to start with the DUNS number. I think the most of you will know it, but this is the key and for our database. So for the moment, we have at our global data cloud more than 480 million companies, and also with where we provide different information for. The DUNS number is the unique identifier that gives that helps to identify companies unique. So to make clear that the right data is combined with the right company. So the DUNS number has a very long history, and yeah, we have several use cases here to give you a quick overview how important the DUNS number is. This is, for example, required to register with the US federal government for contract or grants. Yeah, and just to what I like, it's very good if you like to be a Apple developer or to like to Apple developer program, you have to provide your DUNS number. And so this is a very American thing, but take a look on Europe and especially for Germany. Here in the automotive sector, you already have to bring your DUNS number with if you like to be a supplier for the automotives and also for the chemical industry. So yeah, as you can see here, it's very important. So if you have the DUNS number in your system or in your database, you can enrich a lot of data over different ways of delivery. But I like to give you a very high-level overview on the DNB data universe. So I don't want to go into detail about everything, but I like to mention a few highlights, such as the DNB family tree. So if you have the DUNS number, you don't get only information about this company, you also get information about the family, the hierarchies, who is the highest or the global ultimate company and who is connected there with. And also a highlight is the next part is the beneficial ownership. So we don't just give you information about the family hierarchy of the company. We also can say who are the individuals behind that company and who are the beneficial owners. What is very important to do the compliance checks, due diligence, and also to fulfill the different regulations what we have seen before. And you also get some information about the ownership structure from 0.01%, and we can deliver that, and also on a global basis. And what's also very new in our side, and you will get a little bit more information later to that, is the ESG insights. So we started here a program to get DNB information and deliver that to our customers. But in my opinion, the most significant benefit is that DNB provides you with the data in a consistent and structured way. And that is the basis for the automation of your business processes. So you can, so you and your colleagues can concentrate on the really important and critical cases. And that is what I meant before. You have a lot of things to do and to fulfill different regulations, and we can help you here in a very automated way, and yeah, you can concentrate on the hard facts or the hard cases on that. So now I like to give you a little bit more information about our ESG and compliance data. The focus today is on the ESG data. So, and first of all, what I think the most of you know what ESG is. So I skip that part. If somebody has questions, please put it in the Q&A, and we can come back to that later. But the main challenge at the ESG is the lack of transparency, visibility, and traceability, and also the lack of ESG data collection and analysis. There's not a lot of data. Just 9% of companies are actively using software that supports ESG data. And yeah, we as DNB has seen that lack and yeah, jump here in and like to have the option now to provide information on that. So what we've done is to define a lot of data sources. So first of all, we have our D&B data that we already have had, because we have this for our other topics that you have seen before. There are around about 30,000 data sources, and yeah, with different information like financials, trade data, and such things. Yeah, then also we have here defined as very good data source is global news. So we take information from articles with ESG triggers. We have triggers that can see what there is something, or there happens something with a company, and the main benefit here is we come back to the DUNS number. We can connect the news with the DUNS number, so we can put this information to the right company and make a structure on that, and then we can provide that information. We also have legal and government data here as a big part, and also company reports and websites. So we do a lot of web scraping and NLP analysis, and check the websites of companies, take their sustainability reports and ESG reports and analyze them. And it's also part of our data here. So what we also do is to check if there are some certifications available, and what kind of certifications, and this is also a part of the ESG ranking. And last but not least, we also have an ESG self-assessment. So I will come in the next slide to the different topics of ESG that we have defined. And yeah, not every company has information out there about these topics. It's also possible to send a company an ESG self-assessment to get more about this information. And as you can see here, we have a lot of data sources, and this is one very big difference against our competitors, is that we do this ESG ranking only on real data. So there's no modeling and such things. We take that and like to have real data, and this is the basis to get a very quick, good overview how sustainable companies are here in that ranking. So let's jump on the topics. Yeah, we have we took these 3 pillars or dimensions, as you like, and had in every dimension different topics. And these data sources that you have seen on the slide before refer to these topics. So we bring that data together, make it in a consistent and structured way, and then we get a ranking on that. So these topics here are with a 1 to 100 ranking. Yeah, so for every so, and because of we just use real data, it will be that we don't have for every topic the information for every company. But what we also deliver is a kind of data depth indicator that gives you a good overview about the how good is the basis of the companies. And yeah, for the moment we have more than we are active. We have launched the ESG ranking now in around about 30 countries. Until the end of the year, it will be much more. But I think just in the first half year of this year, we launched around about 25 markets, and in that 30 countries we have more than 36 million companies with where we provide an ESG ranking. And as I mentioned before, not every single topic is available for every country, but we have a quality minimum that is the minimum of information to provide a ranking. So you will have, as I said before, a 1 to 100 measure here. Then you will have in the dimension, for every dimension, we have a 1 to 3 ranking. So 1 is low risk and 3 is high risk. And then there will be an overall ESG ranking, and this will be 1 to 5. Also, 1 is the low risk and 5 is the high risk. Yeah, and so there's one point I like to mention for the moment. Sorry, I forgot it for the moment. Maybe we come back later to that. But yeah, this is what we can provide here. And that gives you the chance to make an estimation of your portfolio for on a high level overview, and get a little bit deep dive in the single companies. If you like to get more information about the ESG part later on that day, Kim mentioned it before, at 4 o'clock, Rochelle March, our head of ESG data product manager, has another webinar, and I think yeah, that's pretty nice, and or you ask the questions later. But for the moment, that's from my side, and I like to hand over now to Birgit.
Yes, thank you, Felix, for this really interesting overview on the regulatory landscape. And now I would like to talk a little bit more about the company perspective, how companies are dealing with these regulations, what options they have. But before I do so, I would like to introduce very quickly SHS for those of you that don't know SHS Vivion yet. So we provide credit risk and compliance solutions for companies. We have more than 30 years experience with more than 100 experts that are working on developing the products and supporting our customers. We have currently more than 120 enterprise customers. Number is growing constantly. And the number I personally like a lot is the fact that we left a footprint already in more than 35 countries with our solutions. So let me continue now with what Felix already started with. If we go to the next slide, if we go to the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
If we go to the next slide, we see that the that the Supply Chain Act that will come effective as of January 2023 will affect companies larger than, that was one too far, Felix, by the way, that will affect companies with more than 3,000 employees. Can you go one slide back, please?
Sorry.
Back, not forward.
Yeah, I know, but it's a little bit verzögert.
Yes.
Ah, yeah, sorry, that was
excellent.
Sorry
Excellent.
for that. Sorry,
Ready to rumble. Great. So companies with more than 3,000 employees will be affected as of January 2023, and companies larger than 1,000 employees will be affected the year after in Jan. And most likely that number will decrease also. And in the end, the goal is most likely to have all companies providing exactly the same requirements that the larger companies will have. Now, when we also look at the EU draft that Felix mentioned before, that is currently in a draft version, that also foresees that even companies with more than 250 employees only and sales of more than 40 million euros in relevant sectors, at risk sectors, will be affected. So we see that it's really coming closer and will most likely affect all the companies in the near future. So let's go to the next slide. And it's probably like with the antitrust or GDPR regulations, where you will have large fines coming up, and most companies will see and wait and see what's going to happen. But the fines are really significant, and we are very curious to see how that will develop, and as of when we will have the first cases that will be established. So again, the fines are really no joke, with up to 800,000 euro, and 2% of the annual turnover is quite relevant. And also the exclusion of the public tenders can be a very painful penalty coming up. Go to the next slide, please. Now, what does that mean for companies? So we saw, now talking to many companies, we also confirmed the overview that you see here. So it's definitely a very increased bureaucratic effort. So the companies, in order to fulfill the regulation, they will need to change their processes. They will need to implement further steps in their checks. So it's a high bureaucratic effort to fulfill all the requirements. That then, of course, results in an increased cost to comply with all this and adapt the processes. Also, one thing that really concerns them the most is the unclear legal implication. So what is the risk? How high would be the fine potentially for the respective company? What is the minimum requirement? So all these things are really completely up in the air for many companies, and it leads to a huge uncertainty on how they should react and act. So also currently, I mean, we all see this in the media. Corona and the Russia-Ukraine conflict is definitely not helping for the supply chains, and insecure supply chains are having a large impact on the businesses right now. And that on top with the regulation is definitely an issue for many companies that they're all facing. In case they implement the relevant regulations and include tools or whatever they will do, they are afraid of facing competitive disadvantages. It's similar to when you look back probably 10, 15 years when it came to just the general compliance requirements, that when it comes to bribery and corruption, that in certain countries and in certain areas in this world, there's a huge fear of facing competitive disadvantages in case you don't play along. So all these things come into effect, and also a lot more, and also the fear of having to replace good suppliers that they've been working with that are just not fulfilling the ESG regulations, and the search for new suppliers, especially now, quite challenging. So let's go to the next, please. Now, what we've seen is 3 different categories of how companies deal with these challenges and how companies could potentially deal with the regulation coming up. So there's the first group that says, well, we're small enough, we have a certain number of suppliers, and we know many of the suppliers. And if we don't know them all right now, but we have a chance to manually check them and to look at them. Some hire consultancies, and they will conduct the check of the suppliers themselves and provide that to the companies. This can only work if you really have a small number of suppliers, and most likely those are the smaller companies that are not immediately affected by the German regulation as of Jan 2023 or Jan 2024, but they are already getting in shape and also using the compliance with the ESG regulations as a marketing tool to position the company on the market as a very compliant, ESG compliant company. So this is also a tool that some can use in order to be really top notch. That has the advantage of not needing a tool, no additional cost, no change of processes, but you need to conduct all the searches and the reviews manually, and you have to generate the reporting by the end of the year, then manually. So it has its ups and downs. But it's up to each company, of course, to decide how they want to deal with the regulations. Then we come to the next group. The next group of companies is I would like to call it the wait and see. So these are very often larger companies, very large corporates that just want to see first how the implications really are. What is the minimum standard that they really need to implement before they now implement a huge process and adapt all their processes and invest lots of money? And they first want to know really what is the minimum standard? What are the cases? Which sanctions will really be applied? But of course, that has a high risk of being the first one to be a sample case. And so you have the high risk of fines, of exclusion of public tenders. Now, of course, the advantage is that you don't over-engineer your measures, that you don't go beyond the minimum standard. But it's a pros and cons, and every company has to decide for themselves as how early and how they want to deal with it. But of course, the risk is extremely high And it can only be recommended to start very early to implement it, because we know from experience that it takes some time to implement new processes and to change it. And it's not very recommended to wait too long and to really wait for the first cases, rather to start with an implementation of a minimum standard in order to ensure to comply with all the regulations that are coming up and that are effective as of Jan 2023. So that leads to the next group. The next group are those, and I'm sure most of you that are listening right now and that joined this webinar are already in the third group, that are looking for a tool. So how can you comply in the most smoothest way and most automated way without affecting and hurting too much your business processes? If we, Felix, go to the next slide, we see so the benefits. So there is a lot of benefits. If we go to the next slide, Felix. Okay. Now we don't see anything. So let me then talk you through. So of course, there is then the option, and that is the one that, especially from the SHS perspective, is the most recommended one, that you implement a tool, which is of course additional cost and you need to adapt processes. But on the other hand, you're on the completely safe side. You have your automated checks. You don't have to be concerned about whether you really catch everything. You can fully comply with the German regulations and also in the future with the EU regulations. You get the audit-proof documentation and all the checks. And at the end of the day, you can have a automatically generated report that you need to issue anyways, and that is required to be issued once per year for the larger companies. So let me help you. We are on slide 57. Going now to slide 58. Thank you. So what are the advantages? And of course, from an SHS Vivian perspective, we provide also a supply chain compliance product, a solution that we will launch by the end of this year. And our product will provide the opportunity to connect any data source. So as Felix introduced, Dun Bradstreet has a huge range of data that they gather and provide. And we, with our supply chain compliance tool, are completely open to connect any data source, and also what you saw, any data block related to ESG and also other criteria that are being offered. We can just connect in our product and make sure that the companies can match their suppliers against all the relevant information there. The other benefit is that it's fully automated. So what I introduced before, how companies can react, you have some of scared of all the manual impact and all the manual effort that is needed, but we try to make everything as automated as possible. Sure, there will be some manual input required, but it will be as automated as possible. And the other thing is that we will provide an end-to-end solution. So that means we will come from the customer system, from the customer master data on the supplier master data, and we go all the way to the end to the reporting, and then the option to provide the feedback back into the CRM. So you have one cycle that can be recurring in the frequency that the customer decides. And we will cover also all the criteria of ESG. So it's not just the environmental and social as the Supply Chain Act in Germany requires, but it will be also the governance part that will be covered. And on the next slide, I will show you how. So we will have different modules. We will have different products, we would like to call it, that can be booked and combined as required by the customer. So it's in that way, it can be adapted to the customer needs. So we start with gathering the supplier master data from the customer EIP, and also provide the option to verify the supplier master data, because we all know how difficult it is to keep the master data clean and up to date. So with this, in this way, we have the opportunity to verify it with an external data source and or verify it directly with a supplier. Then comes the second step, which is something that also Felix talked about before, more up to date than ever with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We will conduct a PEP and sanctions list check to make sure that the customer is not working with a supplier that is on any sanctions list, and therefore would probably have to terminate the business relationship with them. In the next step, then for those that are still going to be a supplier of the customer, they can send a questionnaire. The questionnaire will comprise two different elements. One, the supplier master data part. So you have the opportunity, if you like, to ask your supplier to check his master data and update it if needed. And the other part, of course, is the ESG related questionnaire, where you can ask all the ESG related questions that, depending on the industry, can be adapted. And we will also provide different question templates. So you can, as a customer, you can combine it as you need. Then we will conduct a supplier risk assessment. So there you can see which supplier has a higher risk. So this way you can filter those with an elevated risk that you can run, for example, in a higher frequency of checks. So for example, you say this is the super high risk suppliers. We want to check them on a quarterly basis. And those with a lower risk, we check on a yearly basis. And also you can say for those with a very low risk, probably to have a regular check with a questionnaire should be more than sufficient. And others you will run to, for example, then through the next step, the ESG checks. So these are the checks, the core part of the supply chain compliance product, where you check whether your suppliers are compliant with the ESG regulations. So here, for example, we start with the data that Felix introduced. So Dun Bradstreet is providing a huge variety of ESG related data that we will check against. But of course, we're not limited to that. So there's tons of data providers out there that are focusing on different areas. Some are focusing on the social aspect, some on labor requirements, some on environmental parts. So there's a huge variety of data providers out there, and we are able to connect all of them and provide the customer one result related to the suppliers. Then we come to, in the end, the dashboarding and dashboard and reporting. So the customer at all times will see where the process is, what the result of the checks are, how many suppliers were tested, what was the outcome of the checks, and how they continue. And at the same time, the customer has the chance to define measures in case there were some hits that are probably not that critical. They can define measures for the supplier in order to mitigate any risk. Also, the supplier can upload certificates in case he has any ESG related certificates, he can upload them, and the customer can also store them in their ERP system in order to also have a full picture of the supplier's ESG status. At the end of the full process, we will have a report that is automatically being generated. That report then will comply with all the ESG report related criteria. There's currently in discussion a certain standard on ESG reporting. And once that discussion is finalized and we have a certain outcome, we will also make sure that that reporting is following exactly the defined standard. If we go to the next slide, just a quick glance, more of from a marketing perspective on what makes our product really so smooth and so easy to use, and why we are a big fan of this is it really helps you to ensure that your business is more compliant. It gives you also 100% on all the processes. It saves a lot of time because we provide most of the processes highly automated. So it's a very low manual impact. And so that also ensures a certain standard, because the more it's automated, the higher the standard is also in how it's being conducted. And so in the very end, what's also super important from an audit perspective, it's fully audit proof and transparent. So you have the full documentation of anything that happened in the product, in the tool, and how all your suppliers were being checked and what the outcome is. So you have full evidence that you can provide by the end of the year. Also, in case you face an audit, you can show that to the auditors and you're fully safe. So yeah, this is a quick introduction to how we see how companies are dealing with this, and also on how we also together with Dun Bradstreet, can help you comply with the regulations. And we're happy now to answer all your questions. And you can either ask the questions now or also come up later with the questions and contact us if you need more information. Thank you. So Felix.
So yes, I'd like to start for a moment. I start my video again. So here I am. So yeah, let's come to the first two questions. I think I will take them, and after that, I think Birgit, that should be your questions. So first of all, the first question is that mostly US companies relied on suppliers from Russia. Do you have any indication how far is the German European market affected by sanctioned Russian suppliers? Yeah, just to clarify, the numbers I've said are just the proven, also the proven relationships. So this is data that we have for, so there might be a lot of more, but this is what we can say from our data. This is a proven connection, and for sure we can give an estimation for that. I don't have the information now, but I think we can ask our data scientists, and they will provide us the answer. So I think we take that question with us. And the second, this is a very good question, because that brings to the thing that I've forgotten on the last slide. So this is very good. So sorry. So I check. Let's read it out. There are on the market so many providers. There are on the market so many providers of ESG assessment. Does DNB provide its own ESG rating, or is the DNB rating just a summary of existing ratings? Does a company need to apply for a DNB ESG rating, or does DNB assess all companies available in the database? So first of all, it's our own ranking. So it's not a summary of existing rankings. It's our own model and our own data. So this is very important. And the goal is to have all ESG rankings for all companies they are on our database. To give you a quick overview what that means, at what point we are at the moment regarding, for example, the German market. In Germany, we have around about 5.4 million active companies, and we have ESG ranking for around about 4.1 million companies. So that's nearly 80% of the companies that are available. We have an ESG ranking in there, and this is very, very interesting, because if you regard the German market, there are just around about 300,000 companies that have more than 10 employees, and at the same time a balance sheet that's higher than 1 million euros. So we also have a lot of information for smaller companies. Yeah, and that is how DNB works on that. So we like to have a very bright data availability, and the goal is to have for every. So and then I like to hand over to Birgit. I think the next question is for you.
Okay, so I believe the PEP check performed, and if SHS in-house solutions, or whether now it's moved again. Okay, whether a tool requires clients access, e.g. to Dow Jones. So the PEP check, as well as the sanctions list check, is an offer from SHS. It is something offered in the product, and the data source, so the PEP list itself and the sanctions list and all the external, the data sources, they don't come from SHS, since SHS is not providing data, but we connect the data sources and then conduct the check for the customer against the supplier data. So the customer can choose, so as the question also suggested, whether it's data coming from Dow Jones or whether it's coming from Dun Bradstreet. It doesn't matter from where it's coming. So that requires, yes, the customer needs to have a relationship, a business relationship, a contract with the data source provider. And then we connect it. I hope that answers the question. The next question is, does the tool provide also a financial evaluation, e.g. from Dun Bradstreet financial analysis? Yes, we can connect all the data, so all the data from Dun Bradstreet, and at the end of the day, provide a financial evaluation. But this is not, a financial evaluation is not part of the supply chain compliance product. In general, we have risk assessments, so we can, in our risk suite, we can provide different data in our credit products, but not in the supply chain compliance, because this is not the focus of supply chain compliance, what the financial performance is of the respective supplier. Next question. Will reporting have to take place already in April 2023 for 2020, for 22, or already start only in 24 for 23? Well, to our understanding, it starts for the year 2023, the reporting. So that means by the end of 2023 or beginning of 2024, the reporting will be required, because the measures come into effect as of 23. So that means they need to implement the measures and follow the regulation and comply with the regulation in 2023. So it doesn't make sense to ask for a reporting for the year when it wasn't effective. So Felix, I'm not sure what your perspective on this, but to me, it reads very clearly that the reporting will be done for the first year that it's effective, and that is 2023 for companies more than 3,000 employees. And then, of course, for companies with more than 1,000 in the year after.
So I think it's the same. So I'm with you.
Exactly. In case a supplier doesn't have a DUNS and doesn't want to apply for one, can you also screen the suppliers based on the VAT ID? Yes, there's different other ways to identify a supplier. So we don't depend solely on a DUNS number. Of course, the DUNS number is helpful and makes it a lot easier, but there's many other supplier master data that we could use to identify a supplier and make sure that we check the right supplier. So that is independent.
I think the last question refers to the DNB ESG questionnaire. I think so. I give a quick answer to that. So the question is the ESG questionnaire that will be sent to suppliers standardized so that especially SMEs are not overburdened with different questions by their customers? So the questionnaire is a modular build. So we have some general questions, and if you answer them with a no, so for example, no, we do not do anything in that section, there won't be more detailed questions to that. So it's a little bit yeah, I think modular is the right. So I think it's possible to answer that for every company. So I think that's it.
Let me then also answer that question from SHS perspective, because of course questionnaire is also part of what we offer. And I absolutely agree with Felix. It's a modular approach. So the customer can decide what part he wants to include in his questionnaire and to what extent. We will have standardized questions that can be selected. And of course, then the amount of questions and the focus the customer can decide. It's quite flexible.
Okay, so.
All right.
No more further questions.
Sorry, yeah, I wanted to interrupt you, but I think we do not have any further questions for now. If there should come some more questions, please just let us know, send us an email. We will be happy to help you at any time. And as mentioned before, we will send you the recording as well as the presentation by email tomorrow. Birgit, Felix, thank you very much. That was interesting. And yeah, it was really nice to hear some information about SAS Vivion. Yeah, I would like to thank all the audience as well. And right after the current webinar, we would like to send you a short survey. So we would like to invite you to give us some experience from your side. I would like to say thank you and yeah, stay healthy. See you in a bit. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.